I never thought the day would come when I would speak these words aloud, not to anyone, not even to myself in the privacy of my own mind. But here I am, finally saying them. My father told me I was dead to him, and for years, I carried that sentence like a curse etched into my soul, a scar no one could see, but that shaped every step I took. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, a woman who learned early on that love within a family can be as sharp as a knife and as poisonous as venom. Growing up, I believed my family was ordinary, even blessed. We lived in a 2-story house on the outskirts of town, with a wide porch where I'd sit in the evenings with my younger brother, watching fireflies dance in the summer air. My mother was the kind of woman who always wore pearls, even when vacuuming. My father, Charles, was a man everyone in the community respected, a church-going, business-owning, seemingly upright man. People used to call him the rock of our neighborhood, but rocks have cracks, and once you see them, you can never unsee. I was 15 when the cracks started showing to me. My brother, Michael, was 12 then, and unlike me, he had the kind of charm my father adored. He was athletic, easygoing, a boy who could pick up a baseball bat and swing like he was born to. My father lived for that. Me, I was bookish, quiet, more interested in writing stories than running laps. My mother would smile at my poems and tuck them into a drawer. But my father would scowl and say, "Stories won't pay the bills. Stop filling her head with nonsense." At first, I thought it was just tough love, but as I grew older, I realized it was rejection. He looked at me and saw weakness where I saw creativity, defiance where I saw individuality, and when I began pushing back, when I dared to say I didn't want the life he planned for me, that was when his disappointment curdled into hatred. It all came to a head the summer I turned 19. I had been accepted into a writing program at a college 2 states away, something I had worked endlessly for. I was glowing with pride when I showed him the letter. I can still see the way his jaw tightened, the vein in his forehead pulsing as he read the words. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't even look at me. He tossed the letter onto the table and said, "If you walk out that door and chase this fantasy, you're no daughter of mine. Do you understand me? Claire, you'll be dead to me." I laughed nervously at first, thinking it was just an exaggeration. But then he stood, his towering frame casting a shadow over me, and he said it again, this time slower, colder, dead to me. I left anyway, because how could I stay in a house where my dreams were treated like sins? I packed a single suitcase, hugged my crying mother, and told my brother to write to me. But as I walked out, I heard my father's voice behind me, steady and final. "Don't come back. You're dead to us." Those words haunted me. They wrapped around my ribs like iron chains. For years, whenever something good happened, a story published, an award won, even my wedding day, I'd feel this hole inside me. I wanted to share those moments with him, to prove I wasn't a mistake. But I couldn't, because I was dead in his eyes. My mother would send me letters now and then, careful, vague letters that said nothing too personal, because she was afraid he might read them. My brother called a few times, but as the years passed, his calls grew fewer. He had learned to live inside my father's approval, and that approval didn't include me. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was stronger without them. But that was a lie I used as a bandage. Because every night, When the world quieted down and the darkness settled in, I thought of my father's face when he said those words, and I wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I deserved it. It was 12 years before I heard from my family again. 12 years of silence, of pretending I had no father, no mother, no brother. Then one evening, as I was preparing dinner in my small apartment in the city, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was trembling, hesitant. It was my cousin Anna. She said she hated to be the one to tell me, but my father had died. The funeral was in 3 days. I stood there frozen, the knife still in my hand. My father, dead. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, grief, anger. The truth is, I felt everything at once, a storm raging in my chest. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, and the last words he ever spoke to me were that I was dead to him. How do you mourn a man who buried you long before his own death? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of the funeral, of walking into that church, of seeing the faces of people who believed I had vanished, or worse, disgraced myself. I thought of my mother, who I hadn't held in so long, and my brother, who had chosen loyalty to my father over love for me. And then I thought of something else, something darker. For years, I had swallowed my pain in silence. I had let my father's curse define me, control me. But now, he was gone, and I had a choice. I could stay hidden, remain the ghost he wanted me to be, or I could walk into that church and show them the truth. That I wasn't dead, that I was alive, that I was stronger than his hatred. So I made my decision. I would go, not to mourn him, but to reclaim myself. The day of the funeral arrived heavy with rain. The sky itself seemed to grieve, the clouds swollen and gray. I wore a black dress, simple but sharp, my hair pulled back. As I stood before the church doors, I felt my knees tremble. I hadn't been back to this town in over a decade. My name had become a ghost story here, whispered in grocery store aisles and behind closed doors. And now, I was about to step into the heart of it. When I pushed the doors open, every head turned. The air in the church shifted, thick with whispers. I could see the shock ripple across faces I once knew. My mother, sitting in the front row, pressed a hand to her mouth. My brother, older now but still carrying the same charm, froze in place, his eyes wide. I walked down that aisle slowly, deliberately, my heels echoing on the wooden floor. My father's coffin lay at the front, draped in flowers. I stopped just short of it, my heart pounding like a war drum. "Claire," my mother whispered, her voice breaking. But I didn't look at her yet. I looked at the coffin, at the man who had erased me. I wanted to feel forgiveness, or closure, or something noble. But what I felt was rage. Rage that he got to die with his reputation intact. Rage that everyone around me still saw him as a good man. They didn't know the words he had spoken. They didn't know the curse he had laid on me. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just here to say goodbye. I was here to speak the truth he tried to bury. I turned to face the congregation, their eyes burning into me with curiosity and judgment. My voice shook at first, but then it grew steadier. I know many of you are surprised to see me. Some of you probably thought I was gone for good. That's what he wanted you to believe. But I'm here today because there's a truth that needs to be told. Gasps echoed through the pews. My brother stood suddenly, his face flushed. Claire, don't! He hissed, but I raised my hand to silence him. For years, I said, my voice cutting through the thick air, I lived under the shadow of this man. To you, he was a pillar, a saint, a father figure. But to me, he was the man who told his own daughter she was dead to him. He cast me out because I wanted to live my own life, because I wouldn't let him control me. And while you all praised him, I carried that curse in silence. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief and shock. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My brother clenched his fists, his jaw tight. But I'm not dead, I continued, my voice trembling now with both pain and power. I am alive, and I will not let his lies bury me anymore. I didn't know how it would be received. I didn't know if people would believe me, or if they'd see me as a bitter daughter spitting on her father's grave. But I knew one thing: I had finally broken the silence. And that was only the beginning. The silence that followed my words stretched like an eternity, every second ringing in my ears louder than the church bells outside. My chest heaved, my pulse racing, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would stand up and say, "She's right. We knew him too, and we saw the cracks." But instead, I was met with an ocean of stunned faces. My brother Michael was the first to move. He stepped into the aisle, his voice low but seething. "You don't belong here, Claire. Not today. Not at his funeral." The fury in his eyes stung me, but I refused to look away. Don't you dare tell me I don't belong. I'm his daughter, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. I have as much right to be here as you do. He didn't want you here, Michael shot back, his hands trembling. You should have stayed gone. The words sliced through me, sharp and merciless, because they echoed the exact thing my father once told me. But I straightened my spine and let the fire in me burn hotter. And what about what I wanted? Michael, did anyone ever ask me? Did anyone ever care what it felt like to be cut out of this family? Like I was some disease? I carried his rejection for almost 20 years, and you expect me to stay silent even in death? No, not anymore. A murmur rose in the pews. Some people shook their heads. Others leaned in as if desperate to hear more. My mother's sobs were soft but audible, her shoulders trembling. I hadn't seen her in so long, and yet in that moment, I recognized her fragility instantly. She had always been the woman caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her children. I softened my voice, turning toward her. "Mom," I said gently, "I don't blame you for staying. I know you had your reasons, but I can't carry his silence anymore. I can't pretend it didn't happen, because it did. And it almost destroyed me." Her eyes met mine, full of anguish and something else, regret. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, Michael put an arm around her protectively, glaring at me as though I were a threat. And then, from the back of the church, a voice called out, "She deserves to be heard." Everyone turned. It was my cousin Anna, The same cousin who had called to tell me about the funeral. She stood with her chin lifted, defiance in her eyes. I remember when it happened. I remember how your father used to talk about you. Claire, he wanted you gone. Yes, but that doesn't erase you. You're here, and your truth matters. Tears welled in my eyes at her words. A single lifeline in a sea of judgment. But Michael's face twisted with rage. You don't know what you're talking about. Anna, you didn't live in that house. You didn't see what she put him through. I flinched. What I put him through. It was always framed that way, me as the villain, me as the defiant child, me as the disgrace. But I swallowed hard and raised my voice so it carried to every corner of the church. What I put him through, I repeated. You mean daring to live my own life. You mean refusing to bow down to every demand he made. If that's what you call betrayal, then yes, I betrayed him. But don't twist this into something it wasn't. He wanted obedience, not love. He wanted control, not family. The air was thick now, tense with decades of secrets threatening to burst. I saw neighbors whispering, old family friends looking uncomfortable, the image of my father cracking in their minds. And though part of me feared their judgment, another part of me relished it. Finally, they were seeing the truth, or at least cracks of it. The service didn't continue as planned. The priest tried to intervene, gently urging everyone back to prayer. But the spell had been broken. The illusion of Charles' perfect father, beloved patriarch, had been shattered by my words. And in the storm that followed, I slipped quietly out of the church, needing air, needing space. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, cool drops clinging to my hair and lashes. I leaned against the cold stone wall and closed my eyes. My chest ached with the weight of everything I had said, but beneath it was a strange sense of relief. For the first time in almost 20 years, I had spoken aloud what he had done to me. I had reclaimed my existence, but as I stood there, catching my breath, a voice called softly behind me. Claire! I turned. It was my mother. She stood at the edge of the doorway, her black dress clinging to her thin frame, her eyes red from crying. For a long moment, she just looked at me, as though memorizing every detail of the daughter she had lost. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I'm sorry. The words shattered me. I wanted to run into her arms, to hold her like I used to. But anger and longing battled inside me, and I stayed frozen in place. Why didn't you stop him? I asked, my voice breaking. Why didn't you fight for me? Her face crumpled, and she took a hesitant step closer. You think I didn't want to? You think I didn't cry myself to sleep every night after you left? But your father, he wasn't the man people thought he was. He could be cruel. Claire, so cruel. And I was afraid. Afraid for myself. For Michael. Afraid of what he might do if I defied him. Her confession burned through me like acid. It was the truth I had suspected, but never heard. My father hadn't just been cold. He had been something darker. Something that ruled our family with fear. Then why stay? I demanded, tears streaming down my cheeks. Why let him erase me? Why let him win? She shook her head, her hands trembling. Because sometimes surviving feels like the only option, and because part of me hoped you'd be stronger than me, that you'd find a way to live free, even if it meant leaving us behind. The words cut deep, but they also struck something else inside me. Maybe she hadn't abandoned me as fully as I thought. Maybe she had clung to the hope that I could be the one to break the cycle. I wanted to tell her I had tried, that I had built a life, carved a path, even when the weight of my father's curse threatened to crush me. But before I could speak, Michael stormed out of the church, his face thunderous. "Enough," he snapped. "Mom, you shouldn't be talking to her. Dad's gone, and this is how she honors him, by spitting on his memory." He turned on me, his voice dripping venom. "You got what you wanted, Claire. You ruined his funeral. You always ruin everything." My mother flinched at his words, but I stood tall, even as my body shook. "You can keep worshiping him if you want, Michael, but don't ask me to do the same. I won't carry his lies anymore, and one day, you'll have to face the truth, whether you like it or not." Michael's jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. But instead, he grabbed our mother's arm and pulled her back toward the church. She looked at me over her shoulder, her eyes full of sorrow, before disappearing inside. And just like that, I was alone again. I walked away from the church that day with rain soaking through my dress, my heart heavier than it had been in years. But beneath the heaviness was a seed of something new: strength, defiance, a spark that told me my story wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread through town. Some people called me cruel, heartless for speaking out at a funeral. Others quietly admitted they had seen glimpses of the man behind the mask, that maybe I wasn't lying after all. The divide grew sharp, but I didn't care. For once, I had stopped caring about how they saw me. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it, my breath catching when I saw who it was from. It was from my mother. Inside was a single page, her words trembling across the paper. "Claire, there are things you don't know, things your father kept hidden. I can't write it all here. Please, meet me when you can. There's something you need to see, something that changes everything." My blood ran cold. After all these years, after all the silence, my mother was reaching out not just with an apology, but with a promise of secrets yet to be revealed. And in that moment, I realized the funeral was not the end of this story. It was only the beginning of uncovering the truths my father buried with him. The letter shook in my hands as I read it again and again, each word carving deeper into my chest. There are things you don't know, things your father kept hidden. My breath came shallow, my mind racing through possibilities. What could she mean? What truths had he buried so deeply that even after death, they still had the power to unravel me? For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My thoughts circled endlessly, haunted by questions I couldn't answer. Finally, after nearly a week of torment, I dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. It was written in trembling ink, as if my mother had hesitated even while giving me this lifeline. She answered on the second ring, her voice fragile but steady. "Claire." Hearing her say my name after so long nearly broke me. "Yes, it's me. I got your letter." "What did you mean? What is it you couldn't write?" There was a pause, and then a sigh that sounded like years of regret collapsing all at once. "Not over the phone. Please, meet me tomorrow evening at the old cottage by the lake." That cottage. Memories of summers by the water flooded my mind. My father grilling fish on the shore. Michael and I running barefoot through the grass. That place had been the backdrop of so many childhood moments. And yet now it felt ominous, like the stage for something much darker. I agreed, though my voice trembled. And for the next 24 hours, every nerve in my body burned with anticipation and fear. When I arrived the next evening, the cottage looked the same and yet entirely different. The paint had peeled, the shutters hung crooked, but the ghosts of our past clung to every board. My mother stood outside, her coat wrapped tightly around her. Her hair streaked with more gray than I remembered. Her eyes were wide, as though she feared even being seen meeting me. We embraced awkwardly, years of distance between us. And then she hurried me inside. The air smelled of dust and damp wood. She locked the door behind us before speaking. "There's something I never told you," she began, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Something your father made me promise to bury forever. But after what happened at the funeral, after seeing you again, I can't keep it anymore." My heart thundered. "What is it, Mom?" She hesitated, her hands trembling as she poured tea neither of us would drink. "Your father, he wasn't just cruel with words. Claire, he had another life. Secrets, lies, things he hid from the world and from you most of all." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Another life? What are you saying?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm saying you weren't the only one he cast aside. You weren't the only one he made disappear." The words lodged in my throat, choking me. I gripped the edge of the table. "What do you mean?" She slid an envelope across the table. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy, faded. One showed my father standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, his arm draped around her shoulders. Another showed two children, a boy and a girl, standing in front of a small house. And in the corner of one photo, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "My other family." I gasped, my vision swimming. What is this?" My mother looked away, shame etched into every line of her face. "He had them for years. Claire, while we were at home, he kept another family in the next town over. He made me swear to never speak of it. I found out when you were 13, and when you defied him, when you left, that's why he was so cold. Not just because you chose your own path, but because you threatened to expose his lies." The room spun around me. All those years of silence, all those years of pain, and now this. "He told me I was dead to him," I whispered, my voice breaking, all while he was living two lives, raising other children while he destroyed me. My mother's tears spilled over. I wanted to tell you, Claire. I wanted to scream it to the world, but I was trapped. He made sure I felt powerless, and Michael, he knew, too. He pretended he didn't, but he knew. That's why he clings so desperately to your father's memory. Because to accept the truth would shatter everything he's built his life on. The betrayal hit me like a knife to the gut. Not just from my father, but from my brother. Michael had known all this time. He had carried the truth and still chosen to protect the man who destroyed me. Rage surged inside me, hot and blinding. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I demanded, my voice sharp. Why let me believe I was worthless all these years, when the real betrayal was his? My mother's shoulders shook. Because I was weak. Because I thought protecting the image of our family was more important than protecting you. And I'll regret that until my last breath. Silence settled heavy between us. I stared at the photos again. The faces of those children burned into my mind. Half-siblings I had never met. A hidden family. A second life my father had carried to his grave. And then, slowly, a chilling clarity took hold of me. My father might be gone, but the lies he built still stood. And if I truly wanted freedom, if I truly wanted justice, I couldn't stop here. I had to drag his secrets into the light. I need to find them, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. The other family. I need to know the truth. My mother's eyes widened with fear. Claire. No. If you stir this up, it will destroy what little peace we have left. I met her gaze. Fire in my chest. Peace built on lies isn't peace. Mom, it's a prison. And I've been locked inside long enough. That night, I left the cottage with the envelope clutched to my chest. The rain had returned, steady and relentless, soaking me as I walked to my car. But inside, I felt something new resolve. Over the next weeks, I became obsessed. I traced the faded addresses on the backs of the photos, digging through public records, searching online archives. Every lead felt like a breadcrumb leading me deeper into the labyrinth of my father's secrets. And finally, after countless dead ends, I found them. The woman in the photos had been named Evelyn. She had died years earlier, but she'd left behind two children, Daniel and Rose. My half-siblings. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. They were real, flesh and blood. The shadows of my father's betrayal brought into the light, and in that moment, a decision crystallized in me. I needed to meet them, to tell them who I was, to show them that none of us had to live under his shadow anymore. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that opening that door would unleash more than I could ever imagine. Because the truth didn't just live in old photographs and whispered confessions. It was waiting in the hearts of the people my father had left behind. And once I stepped into their lives, there would be no turning back. The day I drove to meet them, my chest felt like it was splitting open. I rehearsed what I might say. I'm your sister, and you don't know me. But we share the same father over and over until the words lost meaning. When I finally knocked on the small white door of a modest house in the suburbs, my breath caught. A woman in her mid-30s opened it, her eyes wary. I recognized her instantly from the photos, though older now. Rose. Yes, she asked cautiously. My throat was dry, my palms sweaty. My name is Claire. I began softly. I think we're related. Her brow furrowed. Related how? I took a shaky breath. We have the same father, Charles. The silence that followed was suffocating. Her face went pale, her mouth opening, then closing again. Finally, she whispered, "Come inside." The moment I stepped into Rose's house, I felt the air thicken with tension. It was cozy, lived-in family photos on the walls, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. But beneath the warmth was a chill, as if some invisible shadow had followed me inside. Rose motioned for me to sit at the kitchen table, though her hands trembled as she poured water into 2 glasses. She sat across from me, her eyes darting between my face and the floor, as though afraid to look too closely. "Say that again," she whispered. I swallowed hard. Our father was the same man, Charles Thompson. He lived 2 lives. I didn't know until recently, but I found photos, letters, and you were in them. Her face hardened, lips pressing into a thin line. We don't talk about him. Not in this house. Her words hit me like a slap, but I nodded slowly. I understand. I don't want to hurt you. I needed you to know I exist, that you're not alone in this. For a long moment, Rose said nothing. Then she stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a small, battered box. She set it on the table and opened it. Inside were scraps of letters, faded photographs, and a single leather-bound journal. "This is all he left us," she said bitterly. "No money, no explanations, just lies." I reached for the journal, but she stopped me with a sharp look. "Be careful. The truth in there isn't pretty." When I opened it, my father's handwriting leapt from the pages. His words weren't those of the noble man the world thought he was. They were confessions, calculations, notes about maintaining 2 households, manipulating people, keeping his children in line. There were even passages where he wrote about me dismissing me as rebellious, ungrateful, a threat to the legacy I built. Tears blurred my vision, the sting of betrayal cutting fresh wounds in scars that had never fully healed. "He hated me," I whispered. Rose shook her head. "No." "He feared you?" "There's a difference." I looked up, startled. "Feared me." She nodded slowly. "He wrote it down. He said you were the one who wouldn't bend, the one who might expose him. He needed obedience, and you refused to give it. That terrified him more than anything." The weight of those words sank into me. My whole life, I had carried the belief that I wasn't enough, that I was the daughter who failed him. And now, sitting across from the half-sister I never knew, I realized it wasn't weakness that made him cast me out. It was my strength. Before I could speak, the front door opened, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that mirrored my own. Rose looked up. Daniel, she said softly. This is Claire. Daniel froze in the doorway, his gaze piercing me. Claire. I nodded. Your sister? The silence stretched unbearably. And then he laughed a bitter, hollow sound. Of course. Another ghost crawling out of his grave. Daniel, Rose warned. But he waved her off and dropped into a chair across from me. So, what is this? You come here to bond, to share stories about the man who ruined all our lives. Anger flared in his eyes, but beneath it I saw pain, raw and unhealed. I didn't come here to pretend, I said firmly. I came because I've lived my whole life believing his lies, and I won't carry them anymore. Neither should you. His expression flickered, softening for just a heartbeat before hardening again. Easier said than done. You didn't grow up watching him destroy everything you loved. My chest ached. I did. In my own way. He told me I was dead to him. Do you know what that does to a 19-year-old girl? To be buried alive by the man who's supposed to protect you. The room fell silent. The three of us bound by the weight of our shared scars. And in that silence, something shifted. Rose reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. Daniel's eyes dropped to the journal, his jaw tightening. For the first time, we weren't three strangers linked by blood. We were survivors. The days that followed blurred into a strange, painful dance. I spent hours with Rose and Daniel, piecing together fragments of the lives we had lived under our father's shadow. We compared stories, connected dots, uncovered contradictions. Each revelation was another wound, but also another thread stitching us together. And yet, the closer we grew, the more I realized the truth wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. About what we would do with the knowledge we now carried. Because if there was one thing my father had taught us, it was the power of silence. And if there was one thing I swore to do, it was to break it. So I returned to my hometown. This time, not as the ghost of a disgraced daughter, but as a woman determined to reclaim her story. I confronted Michael again, laying the journal in front of him. At first, he denied it. He called me a liar, accused me of fabricating evidence. But when I showed him the entries in our father's handwriting proof of the second family, proof of the lies, his face crumbled. He looked like a man watching the foundation of his life collapse brick by brick. You don't understand, he whispered hoarsely. If I admit this, if I let myself believe it, then everything I built was for nothing. I defended him. I believed in him. His voice broke. I can't. My heart ached, but I held firm. You don't have to keep defending him, Michael. You don't owe him that. What you owe is to yourself, to Mom, to the truth. But he turned away, shoulders shaking, his silence speaking louder than any words. And I realized then that not everyone can handle the truth. Some people cling to the lies because the lies are safer. But I couldn't live that way anymore. The climax came 1 month later, at a town gathering in the very hall where my father had once been praised as a community leader. I stood at the podium, the journal in my hands, my siblings by my side. My voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger, steadier. I know many of you saw my father as a great man. I began. But greatness built on lies isn't greatness at all. He wasn't who you thought he was. He wasn't the father he pretended to be. He told me I was dead to him. But the truth is, it was his own conscience that was dead. And today, I refuse to let his shadow define me any longer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire. But I didn't falter. For the first time, I wasn't speaking for him or for the image of our family. I was speaking for me, for Rose, for Daniel, for every wound he had left behind by the time I stepped down. My chest felt lighter than it had in decades. The truth was out. The silence was broken. And though not everyone believed me, some clung stubbornly to the image of the man they thought they knew. Enough people saw the cracks. Enough people began to question. And that was enough for me. Months have passed now, and I sit here reflecting on everything that has happened. My relationship with Rose and Daniel has grown into something fragile but real, a bond forged not in love, but in survival. My mother and I speak more often, cautiously, as though trying to rebuild a bridge we both know may never be whole. Michael remains distant, trapped in the prison of denial, but I've stopped trying to drag him out. That's his battle, not mine. What I know now is this: my father's words no longer define me. I am not dead. I am alive. And every breath I take is proof that his control over me ended the moment I chose truth over silence. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever been cast out by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally, hear me when I say this: their rejection does not determine your worth. Sometimes, the greatest act of revenge is simply surviving, thriving, and refusing to carry their lies any longer. So when I walked into my father's funeral, I thought I was stepping into the past. But what I truly did was step into my future, a life no longer bound by his shadow, but lit by the fire of my own truth. And if you're listening now, if you've carried wounds that feel too heavy to bear, I hope my story reminds you that even in the darkest betrayals, there is a way forward. It may not be easy. It may break you before it frees you. But freedom is always worth it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, if you saw pieces of your own life reflected in mine, I ask you to share it, because stories only heal when they're spoken aloud. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine, and leave a comment below. Tell me your truth. I promise, I'll read every single one.